I would like to invite Professor Shiji Datta, Director of Center for Civilizational Studies at Rishihood University, to welcome the gathering and introduce the speaker.
Oh, thank you, Shurab. Namaste, everyone. So, today we have something of an unusual subject at hand that we will be discussing. Unusual but interesting. And interesting in the manner that we all come across headlines, news bites, and breaking news on our newspapers and news channels. And since 2021, 2nd of May, when the results of the latest Vidhan Sabha elections in West Bengal were declared, the newspapers and channels were inundated with news reports of horrible incidents of violence all across West Bengal, and even in some border areas of other states. So, there were incidents of people getting killed. There were heinous reports of rapes and murders, and many people left their homes and they were basically hiding from a systematic terrorism that had been unleashed at the aftermath of the Vidhan Sabha elections in West Bengal. Now, those incidents, those reports have a quality of instantaneity to them. And there is a risk that in these breaking news and headlines, we often lose track of the larger systems and the larger happenings in the historical process that we can lose track of these larger systems. So I would expect that in today's talk, which will be delivered shortly by Professor Debajit Jha, we will be able to find certain ways to make sense of what is going on in terms of political violence, and probably also other kinds of violence which may have links to political violence, which is quite possible. It is in this regard that we thought that this topic that Professor Debajit Jha has been recently working on, and we get to hear that Professor Jha and his co-authors' paper, which deals with the same topic, will get published very soon in the Economic and Political Weekly. And we congratulate you for that, and thank you for coming here to the Rishihood University campus. I would like to give a brief introduction to Professor Debajit Jha. Professor Jha is an associate professor at the Jindal School of Government and Public Policy and Deputy Executive Director and founding member of the Center for Complexity Economics, Applied Spirituality and Public Policy at JGU. He holds a PhD in Economics from the Center for Economic Studies and Planning, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Before joining JGU in 2017, he taught economics at different reputed government colleges in West Bengal under the West Bengal Education Service for more than 6 years. During this period, he also held the prestigious position of Assistant Director of Public Instruction to the Government of West Bengal. He has published several research papers in the journals of national and international repute and also participated in many conferences. He also delivered invited lectures in many institutions. Dr. Jha is a macroeconomist by training, and his primary research interest is empirical growth economics and political economy. He is currently working in different interesting research projects funded by the Niti Aayog, World Bank, etc., including nowcasting and forecasting of economic growth and inflation in India for the Amrit Kaal, trying to understand economic growth dynamics of Indian states, among other things. Over to you, Professor Jha. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Professor Srijit. And I think Sujit has given an interesting introduction to what I'm going to talk today. And so in a way, definitely I'm going to talk on this political economy of violence, and more specifically the electoral violence, but some other kind of violence I'm also going to cover. So, actually what happened in West Bengal, since 2011, when the current government has came to power. So from that time, there is a kind of we can see there is a huge political growth in West Bengal. Political growth means, simply we can measure it in terms of, increasing vote share of the incumbent political party. So now there are many interpretations of that, and one of the kind of interpretations is, for example, which comes from the idea of median voter theorem. It says that whenever political growth, or maybe the vote share of the incumbent political party is increasing, it is, in a sense, it is showing that people are supporting the political party, right? And when that can happen, if the overall economic growth of that particular geographical region is increasing, or maybe the living standard of the people are increasing, right? So people are getting some benefit of whatever the government is doing, right? So many observers of the political economy of West Bengal, they say that this increase in the political growth of the state or the incumbent political party is mainly due to the certain kind of, welfare schemes that has been introduced by the government, right, in last 10 years or so. And actually, this is what we are going to contest. We have tried to contest here in this paper, that we are saying that in a democratic setting, when there is a huge amount of political violence is present, right? Or maybe the oppression of the voters of the opposition political party is present, there is a possibility that the democracy itself is not working. So the high vote share in that context may be an outcome of the oppression and intimidation of the voters, not what is happening in terms of, welfare policies or something else, right? So this is what we are trying to show. So this is a joint paper with two of my co-authors. One is Dr. Jha. She is in Manav Rachna University, and then Professor Dibyendu Maiti. He is in Delhi School of Economics. So first, let me discuss the political economy puzzle of West Bengal. So whenever we, say for example, if we try to understand it in terms of the median voter theorem, that what I was talking about, then in that sense, always, the West Bengal economy remained an outlier. Why? Before the current regime, even the left regime, which was the predecessor of that, so they have sustained almost for 34 years in power, and there were huge or large period when the economic growth of the state was declining, right? So often, so it is again remaining a mystery for the West Bengal that if the economic growth is not increasing, or maybe the welfare of the people are not increasing, then why people are voting that particular political party in power? And so in a sense, this remains always a puzzle. So West Bengal's political economy is a puzzle in context of, the Indian or the political economy scenario of the other Indian states. If we try to see that what these vote shares from 2011 in different elections, in Panchayat election, in state assembly elections, and even in the Vidhan Sabha elections. So in all the elections, we can see there is an increasing trend of vote share of the incumbent political party TMC. So in 2011, it was around 39%. Then, except in 2019, there is a slight dip from 44.91 to 43.69%. But again, it has increased in 2021 Vidhan Sabha election. So, very famous, economists like Maitresh Ghatak of London School of Economics, then Abhijit Banerjee, who is a Nobel laureate as well, they somehow tried to relate it with the rise in rural consumption, which is definitely we can use it as a measure of welfare improvement of the people. And so actually they say that since due to the welfare schemes that has been introduced by the government, so people have been benefited, and so people are voting the incumbent government, and that is the reason for the increase in the vote share. Then, but I have already told that I am going to or in this paper we try to contest that particular idea, and then so if it is not the case, so if we for the time being try to see that if there is some other kind of things are going on, then what may be the reason behind this increase in vote share? So this is what we are going to start. So first of all, that there is a clear evidence that we can see that the bar diagram for the period. So these blue bars are for that West Bengal, and this red, this is saffron. I think saffron bars are for all India. So now we can see that the GDP growth for the period 2011 to 2019 for West Bengal not only remained lower than, say, its so all India level, but it was lower than even its previous period, so even its own history. So during the time of 2001 to 2010, so the GDP growth rate was just before the 5%, but it has declined to almost 4% for the period 2011 to 2019. And then when we try to understand that what is the source of this growth from the different sectors, that which sectors have performed well and which sector hasn't. So we can see that there is a rapid increase in the agriculture sector. So we can think that the rural economy is basically progressing in that sense. But there is a massive decline in the industrial and the services sector during the last 10 years period. So again, so if we for the time being that just try to believe that okay, these social welfare schemes are something which is people are getting benefit, right? So then just we try to look at the figures of the social sector expenditure in West Bengal compared to the other states or maybe the all India level, and then the ratio of it. So whether the West Bengal government is or the spending in the social sector, out of which a large share goes to these social welfare schemes. So whether that is increasing or decreasing. So we can see that in the first figure, it shows that the social sector expenditure in West Bengal has declined compared to the all India level. Then again, the ratio of the social sector expenditure of West Bengal and the all India social sector expenditure. So we can see that there is a clear declining trend. So now that the claim that that the social and welfare schemes are somehow benefiting the people, then if the expenditure on these social sector or maybe these welfare schemes are declining, then definitely there is sufficient ground to contest the argument that that this is the source of maybe high vote share or the people are very happy in the state. Then the third point, which is one of the major important point missed by almost all the studies, is high level of political violence. So in recent period, if we see, so basically it is very difficult to get reliable data on the actual number of political violence which is happening in a particular state. But again, there are some sources or maybe some indirect sources which we can think of presenting as evidence. So this is the data of political murders attributed to political motives between 2010 and 2019 for different Indian states. So we can see that West Bengal is during this period, the political murder is highest in West Bengal, right? Then again, one report of the Ministry of Human Affairs submitted to the Election Commission of India before the recent or maybe 2021 state assembly election suggests that as many as 693 cases of political violence occurred during the parliament election 2019. After the election, between 1st June 2019 to 31st December 2019, 852 cases of political violence occurred, with 61 casualties from that particular state. So we can see that there is a huge number of political violence that remained unreported in many of the government studies, like say NCRB report. NCRB is a kind of a report which is collected by the police. So we can think of that why the numbers are comparatively lower in NCRB report, because it is the state government which is reporting these numbers. Okay. Then alternatively, what we can think of as a evidence of political violence, say if there is a huge number of political violence present in a particular state, then there is a possibility that the election, so the nomination during the election from the opposition party will be less. So if we try to see that what happened in 2013 and 2018 panchayat elections in West Bengal, and just try to I'd like to highlight one particular thing, that the panchayats are the source of economic power in West Bengal, because it is a three-tier panchayati raj system, and so most of the government schemes are distributed through the panchayats, right? So now we can see that in the 2003 panchayat election, 10.66% of the seats have been owned by the incumbent political party uncontested. And that number has increased to 34.2%. It is actually a kind of a ridicule to the democracy of any state. So it has increased to 34.2%. So this actually indirectly suggests that there is a huge amount of maybe some kind of barrier that has been imposed by the incumbent political party for the opposition political parties to file nominations. Okay. And even actually the women's are not spared in West Bengal, and Professor Datta has pointed out that the rape is one of the instruments that has been used, because whenever you are basically say trying to intimidate or maybe oppress someone, it is maybe your strategy will be to actually, if we can actually somehow get a sense of fear within you, right? So that is much better strategy compared to say killing some person, right? So maybe rape is being used in that sense. So there are two puzzles in West Bengal actually. So the first puzzle is how the present regime is persisting when the aggregate economy is not performing well. And the second is, if the citizens of the states are satisfied with the performance of the state as reflected by the high vote share of the incumbent, then why would so many incidents of political violence during each and every election be seen? So these two particular hypotheses we have, or maybe the puzzles that we try to resolve in this paper. So in order to understand that, or maybe resolve this puzzle, that what is happening in West Bengal, first what we need to understand is the nature of the society of West Bengal, and that has started, or maybe that somehow changed, the nature of the society has changed during the left regime. And Professor Partha Chatterjee, who is one of the renowned political scientists, so he has termed Bengal society as political society. So what is this political society? So political society is people's dependence on incumbent political party in everyday life. So in every aspect of your life that is controlled by the political party, right? Later on in 2009, Dwaipayan Bhattacharya, another very renowned political scientist, he termed is party society, not the political society, right? So just we can mark the difference, the political and party. So party is becoming the major power in case of that kind of a society. So now if we try to, so basically Avirup Sarkar, he is one of the renowned economists in, he's working in ISI Kolkata. So he tried to explain the persistence of the left regime for 34 years in power in West Bengal using this particular two things in a political society. One is informalization. So if that informal economy is growing, so basically people are getting more and more dependent on the political party, right? And the party organization. If the political party is very strictly organized, and so he was of the opinion that since the left political party was very organized, and since the informalization of the economy was increasing, so these were the main reason for somehow the political mobilization that left has sustained for almost 34 years. Now the problem is, say, now the problem is that TMC, the incumbent political party now, that don't have a kind of a political organization the left were having. So now how we will explain that how TMC is mobilizing, or the ruling political party is mobilizing the people for incumbency, right, without having a strong political organization. So this was our biggest channel to explain. And even when we have taken the data from the RBI statistics on Indian states, so we found that the informalization of the economy has reduced slightly. So it was not that informalization was increasing during the last 10 years, but the informalization of the economy has reduced, right? And the political organization of the incumbent political party now is nowhere close to the left. So in this situation, how can we explain that what is happening, why this particular political regime is basically persisting, and there is the role of political violence and different other kind of strategies that were there. So what we try to argue, that in absence of a strong political organization and a high degree of informalization of the economy, though the informality in the economy has reduced, but it has remained to a very higher level. So TMC has created a new incentive structure of rent sharing by improving two existing instruments of rent seeking. These instruments are syndicate and cut money, to attach workers with the party, right? So these incentive structures help them to form a centralized political organization, successfully replacing the multi-layer hierarchical political organization of the left. And this is what actually we tried to argue in this paper. So both these instruments were present during the time of left, but maybe less prominent because of the strong political organization. Okay, now let's take some of the evidences that which kind of rent seeking, or maybe we'll try to understand that how the political mobilization is happening in West Bengal. So the rent extraction in urban and rural areas. So basically what I'm doing here, basically we try to divide the two instruments working in two different kind of regions. One is in the rural, urban and semi-urban areas where basically the syndicate Raj is operating, and the other instrument, which is cut money, that is operating mainly in the rural area. There may be some kind of overlap, but mostly we can divide it in this way. So syndicate is the popular name of the organized form of corruption and extortion rackets, mainly operate in the manufacturing and construction areas in West Bengal. So a small group of unemployed youth connected to the ruling political party who control a particular area and demand a share of any kind of transaction that is happening in that area. It may be the construction of a building, or maybe buying materials for that, or selling a land, all these kind of things. However, it has actually the nature of these syndicates have changed during the during the current political regime. So it has metamorphosed into corruption and extortion racket since 2008 Panchayat election, when TMC got hold of the Rajarhat New Town area after winning the local body election, means the Panchayat elections. So when TMC came to power in 2011, the party was controlling as many as 175 syndicates in Rajarhat New Town area. And after that, not only the syndicates have spread it to the entire state, but it also have entered into the activities like land dealing, labor hiring, or finding rented accommodations, even to college admissions, right? So now the evidence suggests that this extorted money by the syndicates is shared between the syndicate members and the political leaders of the incumbent political party. There are sufficient evidence, and I have given the actual source of that. Right? Okay. Now the main question is, why are syndicates are found to be associated with the political parties? So definitely, since the members of the syndicates these are kind of extortion racket, right? So they always need protection from police, and the incumbent political party is the best. Maybe the body or the organization to give it, right? But on the other hand, the political parties also need these members of this syndicate, and this requirement may come from two different sources. One is definitely that the money of the syndicates, the extorted money, to take a share of that extorted money is definitely one of the major maybe incentive for the political parties. But the second important point is that the political parties use the muscle power of these syndicates during the elections to intimidate and oppress the voters of the opposition political party. So now similarly the rent extraction or the instrument for rent extraction in the rural area is popularly known as cut money in West Bengal. So the instrument to extract rent from the rural economy is known as cut money, and this is popular term used in the state to represent the unofficial commissions charged from the beneficiaries of the government schemes by local TMC leaders. For example, people need to pay around say 10,000 to 15,000 to entitle themselves for the Indira Awas Yojana. This has been found in one of the ethnographic studies by Professor Shumon Nath, who happens to be one of my earlier friend or earlier colleague in my one of the places I was working. So a Google news search of the term cut money in Bengal provided me almost 1,57,000 news items. And the cut money collected by the TMC leaders is again shared from the grassroots levels to the topmost leaders in the political hierarchy of TMC. So in 2019, after the party workers were dictated to return the cut money, one of the members of the parliament then said that a person who has taken the cut money directly is only the front man. There are others who are behind him. They have also taken their share, so the money has to be returned according to this scale. So the first statement, or maybe that when the chief minister was dictating, it is a kind of a maybe acceptance that actually this is kind of a prevalent thing in West Bengal. And then the statement of the member of parliament clearly shows that it is being shared by different layers of the incumbent political party. So while so now again the question is why people pay cut money. So there are definitely there can be two reasons. One is definitely information asymmetry. So what is information asymmetry? So people or the poor people in the rural areas don't have all the information of the government schemes available to them, while the local political leaders of the incumbent party associated with the panchayats have clear information because they are running the panchayat. So the information asymmetry makes it difficult for the people to verify whether they have to pay money or not to get the entitlement of those government schemes. And these government schemes are not only say the state government schemes, this may be central government schemes as well. So there is an example, a village woman in Hooghly district paid ₹550 to a local TMC leader to get a cooking gas connection under the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, a scheme of the central government for providing free cooking gas connection to poor village women. So, and she was thinking that it is the installation charge, right? So similarly, a poor person in the rural areas often face take it or leave it kind of a offer. So if they don't agree to pay the say cut money, right? So they will not be entitled or maybe enlisted for the entitlement. Okay. So since this kind of things are there, so people easily agree to pay cut money, and that is how it is basically prevailing. Now, what I tried to do, I tried to construct a political economic framework of rent sharing in West Bengal, and definitely let me tell you that I'm coming to the political violence and how it is related to this particular kind of extortions. And so basically the right hand side is the rural economy and the left hand side is the urban economy. And here is the state government and this is the central government who are implementing or giving different funds for kind of say welfare schemes or rural development. Maybe some of the schemes may be for urban development as well, but those are much limited compared to the rural development schemes. And there are three hierarchy of the political agents. First, that at the bottom of that hierarchy is the people or the voters, right? Then the local political elites, those are basically that in the rural area they are the TMC leaders who are basically running the panchayats or maybe somehow related to the panchayats. And in the urban areas, they are the syndicate members. And at the top of the hierarchy is the central political elites. They are the members of legislative assembly or the MLA or the MPs or the state level leaders of the incumbent political party. Now what happens that whenever a scheme is being implemented at the panchayat level, so the middle layer of the political elites, right? So those who are taking the cut money or maybe the syndicate people. So in the rural area where this cut money is prevalent, so they demand an unofficial commission from the people, right? And this money is shared between not only they're getting the entire benefit, but it is being shared with the central political elites, right? And whenever, so basically the income of the central political elites are also dependent or somehow linked with how many schemes the local political elites are implementing and maybe how much fund they are spending for in the rural economy. And so basically since their income is for both the central political elites and the local political elites, their income is linked with the funds, how much funds they are actually utilizing or maybe spending in the rural economy. So we have seen that the service delivery or the government service delivery has increased during the time of TMC regime. Right? There are many papers on that actually try to praise that actually this kind of schemes are being implemented, and since compared to the left regime, there is a huge increase in the service delivery, and now we understand the actual reason is the clear monetary incentive that has been set up by the incumbent political party. So, but again, that maybe this cut money or maybe what is happening in the rural economy that may not be very problematic and maybe even problematic as well, I'm going to explain. But what is happening in the urban areas, that is really problematic, because say in the rural area what is happening, so this money, whenever a money flow is happening, so there will be a kind of, this flow will continue because everyone have an incentive to actually give more money and spend more money. But in the syndicate Raj, or what is happening in the urban areas, because this money flow is not coming from any government scheme. So some people are extorting the businessmen, so the business people are getting discouraged to invest in West Bengal. And that also explains that why West Bengal is getting very limited investment despite several of the business summits for last few years the government is organizing, right? Because it is a kind of a uncertain situation, right? And say whenever there is a fixed cost involved for any kind of investment, so if there is not a certainty of income or profit the business people are getting, so they are not, or they will not feel very encouraged to invest in it. Okay. So now let's unfold the puzzle. So why political violence? So since the local political elites and their associates in the incumbent political party are mostly the whole-time party workers or the syndicate members, so in the majority of the cases their livelihood is entirely dependent on the survival or survival of this rent that they are generating from the rural and the urban economy. Since the rent generation is linked with the persistence of the political regime itself, so which allows them to extract the rent, so their livelihood is entirely dependent on the persistence of the regime itself. So thus, during the elections, in order to protect their livelihood, they do not hesitate to take violent methods of intimidate and oppress the opposition political party voters or anyone who they consider a threat for the threat to the survival of the ruling political regime, right? So this explains very clearly that why there are so many political violences happening during the elections or maybe after the elections. But again, still there are many other kind of political violence that Professor Datta was trying to point out that is also happening, and then we need to find out a reason for that. So the other kind of political violence is, so there is another kind of political violence which is basically related to the distribution of this money. So it is not that you are trying to intimidate or maybe trying to continue these particular rent-seeking activities, but actually there is there is a hierarchical system of, say, distribution of money. So who will be in which position in this hierarchy? So that is one of the source of this kind of conflicts. Say what happened in recent time in Boktui in Birbhum district, and that is clearly related to this distribution. So a person was controlling a particular area and maybe extortion was happening through him, and then some other people have killed him, and then in retaliation some other people have say burned almost 7-8 houses and burned 7-8 people alive.
Yes.
Right. So other kind of violence that is happening or continuing in West Bengal, it is actually related to the distribution of that money, right? Again, say some people may say that there are some kind of religious violence that is also happening in West Bengal. Then how would we be able to explain that? Again, if we see that that even in case of the religious violences, so it is somehow maybe religion may be the trigger of that violence, but it may not be the root cause. Because if the religious violence is linked to the political parties and how the political power churning will happen, right? So then it may be that the religious feelings are only a kind of a trigger, and that is very meticulously used by the political parties for their own benefits, right? Again, in those cases as well, if we try to think it very closely, maybe we will find similar kind of reason that actually say some of the religious leaders or some people, they are somehow enjoying some benefit of this kind of unaccounted money that is flowing throughout the West Bengal. Then why there is an increase in the vote share of the incumbent political party? Again, the reason is very clear, that there is a huge amount of political violence and oppression or the intimidation of the voters of the opposition political party. And in this kind of a situation, we cannot think of a democratic situation what is happening. So basically, the increasing vote share is not the reflection of the democratic process itself, but it is a kind of a reflection of the muscle power. Then why low economic growth? Right, so this is very interesting in a sense that, so we have seen that actually there is or maybe there is an increased incentive for the agents involved in cart money to spend more money, and maybe so that can increase the economic growth temporarily for the rural areas. So cart money may act as a lubricant, right? It may not be very bad in that sense, right? Because it is increasing the flow of money, and the ultimate beneficiaries are the huge number of rural poor. So in that sense, if they are getting more benefit due to the existence of this lubricant or kind of a cart money or the corrupt practice, so it may not be very bad.
But it's for the short term.
But it is for the short term. There may be a huge long-term distortion in terms of the state fiscal position. And for the state, which is already ridden with huge amount of external debt, so for that state, it can be a disastrous thing. So now, but still say for the time being, what we found earlier from the data is there is an increase in the agriculture sector, right? So increase in terms of the GDP growth. So for the time being, let's assume that there was so this cart money is basically improving the economy. But again, what I would like to point out is actually the agriculture or the rural sector contributes only 20 to 25% of the entire economy. The rest of the 80 to 75% are coming from the industrial and service sector, which is under the syndicates.
Yes.
Right? So,
And sorry to interrupt, on that particular slide, another interesting thing is that the GDP share has actually declined from the left regime
right.
to the last 10 years of the TS.
Last 10 years. So in another paper that is in a working state, we have used a difference in difference regression, which basically shows that if the two different trends of say GDP or any other variable is significantly different from each other, and whether they are different from their past experience as well. And we found that actually the growth rate of West Bengal during the current political regime is not only lower than the all India growth rate or the average of all the other Indian states, but it is lower than the earlier regime as well. Right? Okay. And since the 80% of the GDP is coming from the service and the industrial sector, where actually syndicates are operating, which is not having any kind of positive impact on growth, so we can understand that why the aggregate GDP has declined despite agriculture performing much better. Right? So that explains why the GDP growth rate in the economy is declining. Okay, this long run consequence, I have already said that actually the syndicates are like toxic drugs. So if I just give a maybe synonymity of syndicates with something in the medicine, then it is like toxic drugs. So it hampers the growth of the industry and the services. It also reduces the tax revenue the state government is getting. But the cart money are like steroids. So it stimulates growth in the short run, but generates distortions, risk and inequality in the long run. So, and definitely in a state like West Bengal, which is actually ridden with huge amount of external debt, that can be very disastrous. In recent time, we have seen in Sri Lanka what has happened due to the external debt. Though since West Bengal is maybe under a federal system, that kind of disaster may not come. But again, it will definitely create a huge amount of distortion in the state's own resource. And again, actually the problem of this model of development, where actually we are relying more on the political cadres of a political party to deliver the people some kind of welfare schemes against a kind of agency fee that the cadres are charging from the people. So this kind of development model is getting popular in India. That is the major problem. Say after the success of West Bengal in this kind of a framework, some other political parties are also promising people these similar kind of benefits during the elections. Say in case of election in Goa, in case of Punjab and all the, and even most probably in Delhi.
Yes.
So if it is happening there, so then, or maybe if it is becoming a role model, then definitely we need to give a maybe clear or we need much clear understanding of the consequences that can happen in those particular states. Okay, so what is the way forward? Basically, I don't know. I don't know much about what can be the way forward, but definitely we can think of something. Like one kind of things, maybe say social audits can work in this case. So if for the government schemes, but again in a state where there is a huge amount of political violence, so who will do the social audit and who will show the courage to show maybe social audit the government schemes? I don't know, but maybe that can be a way out. So, and even say in case of the rural economy, if the information asymmetry is the major reason that why people are not protesting for giving cut money, then maybe we can try to remove the information asymmetry by giving more information to the people regarding the government schemes and maybe telling the people that actually you don't need to pay anything to get the benefit of that. Or maybe setting up some kind of resolution redressal bodies. So if there is a kind of someone is asking you some kind of benefit for entitling you to some kind of government schemes, there will be a place where maybe they can report. Maybe actually the incumbent government in 2021 has taken similar kind of strategy by that particular thing which is called DDK ball. Right? So DDK ball may be a kind of informal strategy to actually redress those kind of grievances, right? So maybe that is, but we need a kind of maybe much more institutional system in that case to get rid of the problem of this kind.
Sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but still there is a fear of violence.
Still there is a fear of violence. So actually whenever there is a violence basically, and if it is an electoral violence, then actually democracy is not working at all. So that is the dangerous thing. And when democracy is not working, basically nothing is working in a particular society. Okay, so maybe I would like to stop here, and if there are questions, I can take them.
Sure. So, without further ado, we will go into the Q&A session, and because we are small in number, please feel free to raise your hand. Professor Jha can take them one by one and address them.
What is the role of demography in this political?
Right.
Because one observation which I did when I went recently to Bengal is people there are spiritual. Even Hindus are, I think, like it's not. Hindus there are also very spiritual. Why is BJP not able to capitalize, these Hindus who are actually into religion and all that and make them as a vote bank? What is the reason behind that? And the influx of many Bangladeshi Muslims who are coming into Bengal, what is their impact on the elections?
Definitely. So the infiltration has remained one of the bigger challenge for West Bengal, and maybe it is not only unique to West Bengal, but it is any kind of state which is actually bordered within or having an international border. So it is very difficult, and if there is a disparity of income in these two places in terms of average income, then the flow of people is very difficult to stop, because if you try to see that what happens in US and Mexico, so Mexican people, because of having lower income opportunity, they migrate to the US, or maybe through any kind of channel they would like to pay for, or even maybe crossing a kind of a huge desert, right? So, but in this case as well, that is always true. But the other point that I would like to, so infiltration of the people from Bangladesh is definitely maybe one of the reason, and that can explain the growth of the Muslim population in West Bengal in last say couple of years, or maybe last 20-30 years. But the major point that I would like to highlight here is demography can play a much bigger role, not only by the share of the people of Hindu or Muslim or some other particular religion, but and definitely Muslim population is almost 30% in West Bengal, so it plays a major role in that. So there is no denying of that fact. But actually the age of the population may also matter. Say Bengal is having a kind of aging population now, right? For the younger population, it is much easier to sustain a political violence compared to an old population. So old population will easily succumb to any kind of threat given by a group of young political leaders, right? So that may be one of the reasons. So basically, in order to study this, what we are trying to do now, basically we are now collecting some data of political violence from some states. We have just started this project, and we are actually collecting this information from newspaper articles because there are no other source. And we are trying to, so there are basically several hypotheses. One of them is whether the history of left violence or left rule has something to do with this, because the evidence says not only in Bengal but in Kerala, say political violence is a kind of a prevalent thing. So there may be some kind of a maybe relationship between the left political rule and the political violence in a state. The other things maybe say this the South Indian political the South Indian states are also aging in terms of their population, and Bengal is one of the Eastern Indian state which is actually having kind of a aging population now. So maybe we are trying to, so once this data will be constructed, it will take huge time, I can understand. But once this data will be constructed, we'll be able to, I think, reflect more on these particular issues. Right.
What about Hindus and BJP also connection?
Right. So there is in the newspapers you will see that there are many articles on this particular aspect, that a kind of the Bengali Bhadraloks don't prefer a kind of maybe religious sentiments or maybe religious polarization. What BJP is doing in West Bengal? This kind of statements are there, and so if actually even actually the last lecture on this particular topic when I was giving, so one person asked me a very interesting question, and this question is very similar to that why basically that it is a some kind of a maybe her own observation that actually Bengali people don't like all this religious polarization or maybe religious sentiments is entirely missing. But actually that may not be true, in a sense that it is not. If we look at the vote share of BJP and how it has increased, so it is very difficult to refute that claim that people are not actually attached with BJP or people are not liking the ideology of BJP. It may be a kind of a very small fraction of the middle class urban people. They may have a kind of a huge heritage of left sentiment or maybe left liberal sentiments, or maybe something which now transformed in a kind of a support base for the TMC as well in the urban areas. But the actual people in the rural areas, they are very much attached to the religious sentiments in West Bengal, and basically it is very difficult to say that they are not attached to the BJP by looking at this particular vote share. That in 2019 the vote share of the BJP was 40.64%, and in 2021 it has declined to just only 2% to 38%, right? So this 38 and 40%, maybe these vote shares clearly suggest that that actually people are attached to the kind of maybe the religious or maybe the value system that BJP tried to maybe inculcate. So it is that particular argument that actually the Bengali Bhadraloks don't prefer this kind of a maybe religious sentiment is entirely wrong.
Any other questions?
After this election violence went, a lot of political violence happened. Right? After that, a lot of people were complaining against BJP that if there is your government in the center and your own karyakartas are getting killed, you are not doing anything. And how is this going to impact in the future elections for the BJP's organizational ability?
Yeah, so that is a very interesting question. Maybe definitely this is not a part of what we have done or studied actually, but I can try to think of what. But actually, in terms of the ground level sentiment that I have seen in West Bengal, it is not very positive after the kind of thing that has happened after because many of the state level political leaders of BJP couldn't stand behind their own party workers during that time. And that can have a very long run consequence definitely in West Bengal. And many of the workers, those were supporting the political party for a very longer period of time without even actually during the operation of the left regime or maybe the TMC regime as well. So they are now very discouraged. But again, what is the way of hope is basically that whenever there is a ideological maybe support base, that is very difficult to destroy even using the muscle power. So since those particular support base was say 5-10% support base of the voters, BJP always retained even during the worst time that it has seen in West Bengal. So maybe that support base will not destroy. But the fluctuating vote which was coming towards the BJP during that time, or maybe last 5-10 years, so that may definitely, there is a kind of that may be hit hard.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. So, very interesting talk and several threads of information and ideas that you have provided through this talk. I could correlate some of the incidents and make sense of them in a way. You have interestingly touched upon the information asymmetries. You talked about the information asymmetry, which is particularly, there, in the rural areas. So, do you think that the digital revolution that has happened in the last 5-6 years with the proliferation of the mobile internet and so on, that information asymmetry can be tackled? Have you given some thoughts to that? And also, how do you see the role of the bureaucracy, the All India bureaucracy and also the West Bengal civil servants in this entire structure of cut money and rent extortion that you have been talking about?
Exactly. So this is a really interesting question, and actually once we were discussing about it, actually say when we were thinking of what kind of maybe way forward, so we were thinking that maybe that even after the 2021 state assembly election, if you see that there are many schemes, those were earlier been implemented through panchayats. Now there is a slight shift toward implementation through the bureaucracy, and maybe using different kind of say the electronic media or not media, it is the kind of different kind of say tools or the technologies that is being implemented. But again, the problem is that when we are thinking of say some kind of technological revolution or digitization, then first question is whether the incumbent political party wants it or not. But since what I tried to show that the political party is surviving or maybe attaching the workers with the central political party through these incentives or through these rates that is being generated. So there may be a kind of that the political party itself or incumbent party itself don't want, right, to happen. So in that case, so what kind of evidence is what I can think that there is a kind of misreporting of the names, or maybe so in the digital platform, say the beneficiary names have been imported, but at the same time the names are wrong. So the actual beneficiary is who, it is very difficult to identify in that case.
Spurious data.
So spurious data is there. So all these things, but definitely the digital revolution can change many of these things. But actually the involvement of the bureaucracy, I'm not very sure that which kind of impact it can come, because in some other places, in other contexts, when bureaucracy is having the almost power, so we have seen that the bureaucracy becoming kind of a corrupt
Part of that system.
part of that system. So it is very difficult to understand, but definitely the digital revolution will definitely is going to breach some of these information asymmetries.
And again, coming to that disparity between the GDP index, comparing the previous left regime, the last 10 years of the
Right.
left regime, 2001 to 11, and the run of the incumbent political party in the West Bengal government. What sort of reasons do you attribute this disparity of the GDP? Because there was this very interesting and impactful incident in West Bengal politics when the Tata Motors wanted to make a headway into West Bengal and set up the nano factory, which basically gave Mamata Banerjee the leeway to create a very impactful political movement through Shingur, and then which catapulted into Nondigram and so on. So, but in the last 10 years of the TMC's 2 terms, actually 3 terms now, we haven't seen any significant investment of heavy industry coming into West Bengal. So, is that a reason, or what can be the factors?
So basically, that what we tried to show here in this paper is that during the time of left, say the syndicate was there, but it was limited to only in the Rajarhat Newtown area. It was not spreaded to the entire state, right? So it was just only kind of a limited effect in a particular state and particular area, and specifically to the construction sector. But it was not prevalent that much, right? So initially the aim of these syndicates were to form a kind of a cooperative to help the unemployed youth to get some kind of the supply contracts they can get for the buildings that is happening in that area. But from 2008 onward, that has changed entirely. And now this particular system of syndicate Raj is actually the entire state is in its clutch, right? So the area has increased a lot, and it is not so. Actually, what we were trying to see that whether that during the last 10 years of the left regime, so the main contributor to the aggregate GDP was the construction sector, right? And then actually from 2008-9, that construction or the real estate sector has declined. So its contribution to GDP has become half of the earlier contribution to the GDP. So basically it gives us again another support that since the syndicates are most prevalent in that sector, so that sector receives the worst hit. And in case of West Bengal economy, if we can think that what are the major sectors that is contributing to the most of the GDP, then definitely construction or the real estate is one of the major sectors in West Bengal. Because the population is aging, so they are actually dissaving, everyone needs a kind of a maybe safest place to stay, and the population density also matters a lot, because the population density in West Bengal is very high. So because the demand of housing is much higher compared to any other state.
Right. From what you say, I think the picture looks bleaker than it seemed, because during the last 10 years of the left regime, the only two pockets of big construction was in the Rajarhat Newtown region, and also one project in North Bengal, which is near Shiliguri.
Near Shiliguri,
Uttorangi. Yes. So now it has actually spread to other pockets like Asansol and even Kollani and things like that, places like that.
In all the places.
Still, the share of the construction business into the GDP has declined, which shows that these syndicate tentacles are very dangerous.
It is at a very dangerous level, and actually for any business person who is trying to invest in West Bengal, so it is a very discouraging environment.
Nightmare.
Nightmare, because in geographically West Bengal is having a big advantage because it is close to the sea. It is maybe in the eastern India there is a huge market, but there is not a kind of a supply side for that, because the rest of the part is the other countries, right? Specifically for the entire northeast region. So now they need a kind of a supply or maybe place from where we can transport the commodities, goods and services very quickly, right? So in terms of its geographical location, so West Bengal is a very lucrative place for any people who is trying to invest. But again, for these political regions, it is actually very difficult to, or maybe it is not very difficult to understand that why the investment is coming, despite its kind of lucrative geographical advantages.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Wonderful. Then in that case, I would like to invite Professor Soumya to deliver the concluding remarks and vote of thanks. And thank you, Professor Jha, once again for this enlightening talk.
Well, I don't have a lot to say except that it was a brilliant presentation, and thank you for giving it here, delivering it here. I remember this philosopher, the French philosopher Michel Foucault, writing at one place that truth is a political economy. It has institutional and economic underpinnings. And if I remember correctly, he writes that the truth is institutionally and economically teased, so to speak. So here in this instance, you have depicted an entire political economy of violence. You have depicted how violence is institutionally generated. And I've noticed that there are two dominant aspects to your presentation. On the one hand, violence is the outcome in the context of West Bengal of the absence of a welfare role by the state. So in this case, I suppose, violence is the only route through which, the pathway through which the state or the party ruling the state may elicit the political allegiance of the population. And on the other hand, you have depicted with a sufficient detail the extortion economy, which once again necessitates the resort to violence on the part of the ruling party in the state in West Bengal. So once again, thank you very much for this great presentation. And my recommendation to you is that, or my request rather to you is that, you ought to consider developing this work into a full-length monograph, because we stand to benefit greatly from it. It's going to be a path-breaking work if you do so. And I'm looking forward to reading the final article when it appears in the Economic and Political Weekly. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a truly enlightening experience sitting through this presentation by you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Jha.